Hello and welcome to the November 29th edition of the weekly JupyterLab call. Today we've got 15 people on the call and we have got 2 people in the agenda. And so if you would like to talk, you have plenty of space today. So add yourself to the agenda. Or if there's something you'd like to discuss at greater length, you can put it in the bottom additional discussion section. But yeah, why don't we get started with you, Mike?
Hi. So I've been looking at resolving a feature request for JupyterLab, which involves navigating to recently closed documents. And there is an extension in JupyterLab Contrib, which provides a similar functionality of recording the recent documents. And it seems to me that having an API for extensions to request the history of recent documents to display that in different form sounds as a reasonable part of JupyterLab core. But my idea for that was to basically merge the manager part of that extension, so the token provider, which Frederick contributed, refactored recently. When I started looking into the code, I realized that that's equally well we could basically merge the entire extension, because there is not much left once you copy and paste the service itself. Because the only other thing that the extension does is adding menu entries with the list of recently opened documents. So I just wanted to see whether anyone has opinions on that.
Go for it.
Do you have an opinion?
Go for it. It's a small and nice addition, I think. And as you said, it may be very useful to have access to the history of the open file.
Where does it get serialized to disk, or does it just live in your browser? Like, what is the quality of service that someone's expecting here?
So it is currently using StateDB, and it's filtering the results based on your most recently, because you can open JupyterLab in different places with different server routes. So it will filter out server routes which do not match the current one, or rather are not accessible within it. But that's a very good question. I also wasn't sure whether this is the best we could do, but it's certainly not bad.
Yeah, I mean, workspace could be reasonable. So if you had a sidebar that was recent documents, and there was a command of create recent document sidebar that had a list of stuff, so you could serialize. I mean, that could be awkward. And anytime anytime that there's data that's not on the screen, it could be awkward for somebody downstream. Like, what were you looking at? It's a little snoopy. I don't know. Some of those asks of going to another browser and expecting things to just work, it is bothersome. Like, is this a thing that servers should own?
Well,
right.
This is in the same league as everything else in your workspace. And as long as you give the user the opportunity to not save that as a, to not record recents, I think it's just like everything else. And you're like remembering which documents you have open, what their names are, what their paths are. That's all content too. So this doesn't really feel like a different class of user data. It's the same class as what did you have open in your file system before, right?
So you could argue that if by accident or on purpose user closes the workspace, they might still want to easily get back to the most recently opened documents.
And how do you, so that can't be state DB anymore, right? Because state DB is just workspaces. You would have to have a different provider.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, yes, if StateDB was cleared by clearing the browser data or by some other accident, then yes. But if they purposefully closed the workspace, like used the URL commands to do that, because we don't have UI to manage that yet, then maybe, like, what I'm saying is it might be implemented using the same stack, but not necessarily live in the same, like, not in the layout restorer.
Yeah, we could have a different instance of a state DB that's tied to some other backend that is like your, well, you have user settings, you have workspaces, you could have history be another folder in the user folder, and the user can blow it away either from the command line or but okay, but that's a bigger story than bringing this repo into core, right?
Yeah, I think that's all that I needed. It's we can continue discussion on the pull request regarding implementation details.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the StateDB one is fine for that 80% case. It's not going to leak any information to someone else that shouldn't be seeing it. If someone else is using your browser, that's your fault. As long as it's got some way that an extension author or a site administrator could mount another provider of history stuff, but maybe it already does that.
Okay. Any other thoughts, or should we move on? Okay, great. Fred, you're up.
So I raised the question to the previous meeting, but now that Notebook 7 has been released, and I want to raise the question of should we merge this meeting with the Notebook one that was created specifically for the appearance of the Notebook 7. That was a big work to be done. Yeah, so that's the question. And the other one is just a reminder for the council members that you have up to Monday for nominating a candidate for the software steering council representative for JupyterLab project.
Is there a proposal about the notebook call? Is the proposal to start this call half an hour earlier? Is the proposal to cancel that half hour? Like, if we had a specific thing to vote on, maybe, does anyone have a suggestion?
I would suggest just start when we start this meeting. I think the attendance has been low and the agenda has been low lately.
I guess it's a bit more comfortable for our friends in America.
So we talked about this last time we met too. I brought this up because doesn't make sense with folks spending energy when they could have it otherwise. I'm curious. So like, I'm going to announce my thing too, but we're going to try and run a community call during this meeting in 2 weeks. I think it was. 2 weeks, right? And there aren't many more meetings the rest of this year. So I'm wondering if we're like planning for a schedule for next year in theory. Like, is this more because like when we got to this conversation, we talked about a larger shakeup of meetings in general. And I'm wondering if this is part of that. But it seems like on the community call day, we were going to use the notebook call at least for triaging before the merge window. But yeah, so Fred, what kind of timeline you thinking on this kind of transition? I feel like the new year might be a good time for it.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Let's do it the good decision of next year. Good by the sense of like common sense of New Year, not saying it's the best solution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things we got to in the last notebook meeting was talking about future directions, right? Like notebook 8, JupyterLab 5 kind of deals. Maybe for the rest of the year, that time would be a good time to like talk about some of those things. Like I really don't think we've had much time to talk about that future vision, but maybe we could think about using that time a little bit differently for the rest of the year.
This all sounds really good and promising. I think we should just think about who is actually how to make a decision. So for example, if we have the slot between what it is that 8:30 to 10 Pacific time, and it's occupied by notebook and lab councils right now, and we want to reallocate that and say, hey, you know what, we're actually basically the same team and we're going to use the last 2/3 of that, and in exceptional cases like new releases that need triage, and in addition to regular triage, we'll use that other 30 minutes. We could do something like that, or it could end up being something even bigger. Like, I don't know, some teams meet very differently, like at a very different cadence than we do. Like maybe it's not always the case that meeting every single week is like the optimal cadence, right? So like this can be open. If anyone has given thought into this or has a specific, like, how do we get from here to our next versions and what goes into them? Those are like fairly open questions. And it is, if anyone has thought about it or wants to think about it, please, I think bringing forward a proposal that people can say yes or no to is a really like powerful thing that helps unblock. Like it leads a conversation into an action or a decision in a way that is good. So yeah, like if you have an idea, let's just consider it. I mean, not, you know, to put pressure on anyone right now to say something, but if you do, you can write it in an issue, we can vote on it. Or, you know, if you have been thinking about this and want to make a proposal anytime in any now or future call, please do.
To some other people's points, I think like triaging has been brought up. Mike was just talking about extension developer time. And that has me thinking also about, Darren, as you pointed out, some groups run meetings differently. I know that Jupyter Hub has their collaboration cafe, which definitely I think does a good job of providing time and space for some of those other things. And it kind of fits under community engagement as well. So those are all good targets, I think. And I guess you could also say kind of like office hours could be a larger like broader description for one thing you could do, which would also fit extension developer time.
Yeah, another model is over on Jupyter Server. They have the contributing hour. If nobody shows up, they still do it, and they pick up a PR or try and build something or try and build an extension. And sometimes people just railbird for that, which can be very meaningful.
Yeah.
A lot of skeletons.
Maybe when everybody comes back refreshed from the new year, we think about a calendar meeting, right? Like now that the DEI committee is getting spun up and the community committee is getting spun up and it seems like everybody's getting organized here, it's really time to think about the community. So maybe recharging for like 2024. God, that was depressing to say. That's the first time I said that. Thinking about meetings for 2024 and having, say, a big meeting about that early in the year might be a good idea, right? Like, what's the purpose of the JupyterLab meetings, right? Like, sometimes where our purpose is triaging, sometimes our purpose is talking about onboarding, or sometimes our purpose is talking about really hard things, right? And they all kind of conflict with each other, right? So having some kind of understanding about the goals of our meetings and the expectations, it seems ripe with the direction that the steering council is going and the executive committee is going. But yeah, it would be good to organize Jupyter at large again. I think some of the things that are hard are that we're separated, right? And we can't, it's not easy to share these collaboration cafe concepts or office hours or triage events without being connected.
Okay. That sounds reasonable, all of that. Also, just another reminder of other thing that's happening in the new year, which is a new SSE rep for lab. So like Fred said, nomination period is coming to a close soon. So if you're thinking about it, self-nomination is totally cool. If you're thinking about it and you're shy, ask me, I'll nominate you. I don't understand exactly how that works, but that's fine too. But yeah.
Yeah, it works like that. Well, if somebody point out somebody else, anyway, I first ask the people that are nominated if they want to be nominated, and then we'll vote for the nominee that I accepted their nomination. Right. So it's a bit like Nobel Prize, except that it's not so noble.
All right then. Okay, cool. Let us
I want to see what the royal clothing looks like at Planet Jupyter, though. I feel like you and Fred will look excellent in some orange furs.
That's a wild image. Okay. Oh, it's me. I'm next. Yeah, so I have linked a PR I have open and that I've brought up a few times, which is for this proto mini map virtual scroll bar component for virtual rendering of the notebook as an alternative to the native scroll bar. And it's got a lot of comments on it. And Fred has very graciously done a review of this. And I don't know, I guess what I'm asking is for people to maybe look at it and also think about the question of minimum viable introduction of this feature. Like, have we met that, right? Like, there's a million ways we can improve it. So don't think about how we can improve it. Think about what we can't ship it without, please, and take a look maybe. I think from my point of view, I need to double check the markup and its attributes in terms of their role, if that's correct. I think it is, but I need to double check that. And aside from that, I saw a CI failure that had to do with the build of a different package, so I didn't attempt to fix it here. I think the extension manager plugin, it is missing its TS config, the TS test.config, for some reason. But I didn't want to clobber somebody else's fix if that is someone else's fix. If not, I'll fix it in this PR. I'm happy to. But if that sounds familiar to someone, please just ping me in the issue. in the PR rather. And yeah, this is also one of the last remaining things on the 4.1 meta issue. So I am anxious for whatever you guys think is required to get this in, because it's holding us up now. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has a response.
I actually think this is a major missing feature in JupyterLab. And the feature that's missing is actually the cell label, the cell index label. Because like when you're talking about notebooks with other people, you'll say the 7th cell or the 8th cell. You don't say like the 4th code cell, right? So like having this is super valuable. When I look at it, I get like, oh, something's weird. Part of me wonders if it would be possible to do the numbers as pagination on the bottom rather than a scroll bar kind of thing, because this feels more like pagination to me almost. And I'm wondering if there's a setting or if it's possible to make this horizontal at the bottom, because that would fit more with like my expectation of something like this, where I'm like, hey, I'm chunking pages or kind of grouping pages or something. But I think this feature needs to be there. I'm excited for people to get it. And I think, oh no, I feel like there's something great about it, but there's something like a little bit weird about it, which is kind of why you're asking too. But yeah, the pagination, I wonder if it could align closer with pagination UI behaviors. That would hit my expectation a little more, I think, but I'm not sure. I haven't used it yet.
So part of the motivation for it being where the native scroll bar lives is because the native scroll bar is erratic in this mode as it progressively builds the page. However, the feature I think does belong in general, and perhaps it might evolve into more of a pagination, as you say. But even pagination, you know, like a comic book reader or like the Mac OS preview app or whatever often has a large sidebar with, you know, previews of things, of pages. So I could still imagine it being vertical, but like maybe not so much a scroll bar then. Right now it's very much a scroll bar.
I see. If it like it's somewhere in between a scroll bar and a preview window in like Google Slides or like Google Docs or something like that, right? Is kind of where so you're seeing this as being able to add features later on and actually make that kind of experience, I guess.
I mean, the mental model is a little bit like the mini map of a rich text editor, like in an IDE, where you see the shape of the whole document, and perhaps there's metadata interspersed, like where errors exist or where like unstaged lines live or whatever. You can imagine all sorts of richness that can be captured there. We're very far from that. This is super primitive, but what's step one? Just a box for each cell.
This is consistent with the accessibility work too. So like one of the things I've had to do recently is I've added hidden components or elements that have like lines of code in there, or, you know, like different, or the time it started and the time it ended, but I hide those things. This way, when you come to it, it says cell 1, 3 lines of code, you know, 2 functions or something like that, right? But being able to add more features to the description of the cells would definitely make the experience more accessible in the long term.
Well, yeah. So one thing here, right now, if you want to re-implement a little bit of notebook, it's really hard. It's really hard to change how a little bit of thing works. And so if what this is demonstrating is, and we need this in a lot of places, like any MIME renderer, any output that has a MIME bundle, why can't I change the view to something else? You know, I can't see a picture. I want to see the plain text. Don't show me a picture. I, don't have an extension for whatever. Give me something else. And at that higher order for the notebook, sure, your PowerPoint sounding kind of thing, that's a way to look at a notebook. Maybe someone wants to look at it like Excel. Maybe somebody wants to look at it like I forgot not the Ginkgo or something had like a side scrolly kind of thing. So if those, without changing how cell worked, because we need that needs to not be just changing all over, but that global rendering experience is something that could be pluggable and changeable dynamically without having to restart your browser or reinstall an extension or change a bunch of settings. It's like up in that cell toolbar, there's a view button, and you can view it as a directed node-based graph. You can view it as a table. You can view it as your slideshow thing, whatever you're describing here, or you can view it as a long-form scrolling document with a native scroll bar. All those things. They should all be possible.
By the way, quick question. Do I need to build this from source, or actually, is there a binder link for this? There should be, right?
I was on mute, but I meant to sigh loudly. So imagine I sighed loudly. There's a binder link, but it might not build. I don't have a good answer beyond that right now. Yeah, there's always a binder link for each PR. It's like the first comment you'll see. So that's where you always find it. The trouble with that is scarce resources on Binder, and the build's very often not completing. I made a video to at least give you an idea, but the video is actually quite old at this point. So after this call, I will update the video to what's actually there now, which is a bit different than what's there right now. Your cells that are selected are highlighted. Oh, demo. Well, I might actually have it running on my machine right now. And if I do, I'm sure I'll find, oh, okay, it is running. Yeah, sure, I'll do a demo. Get myself accommodated to that. I hope it doesn't take up too much. I'm on a pretty large screen. Oh, but I guess I can just share a window. That'll be small. Like, that's probably smart. I should do that. Okay, so cool. Here goes. Oh, geez, I lost it. Oh, geez, there's so many windows. How am I going to ever find it again? That's the trouble with having a big, long-running. That looks like it might be JupyterLab. Let's go with that one. Are you seeing JupyterLab on your screen?
Server connection error?
Yeah, but I'm not seeing the window. You guys are, okay, cool. There it is. I'm seeing it now. Sweet. Let's see. Okay, cool. So the sidebar, the scroll bar rather, is this thing right here, right? And the first one is blue just because of selection. It just follows selection. Fred asked the reasonable question of, okay, should it also indicate active, like when you have this going on? And I don't know. Oh my, yeah. Let's say also this. Uh-oh, whoa, holy crappington, check this out. Are you seeing this? This is amazing.
Yeah.
I think I discovered a bug, everyone. I don't know if that's a bug I created or a bug I revealed. That's the trouble with this thing, because part of how we got here is scrolling is really hard, right? And we're trying to give you tools to make it less obvious that it's hard. But yeah, here we are. The other thing you can do, I'm sorry, I can't keep a straight face after that, is you can use this thing obviously to jump to your notebook. And what you're not seeing is the native scroll bar, even though you can scroll with arrow keys or with a trackpad or whatever. And holy crap, this is awesome. Guys, I'm pretty sure
I love
this. Yeah.
I love this demo. I love this demo. I feel like we're in a time warp.
Yeah, I feel like I don't, again, this is either me or the scrolling of the window list to begin with, but this doesn't quite look ready to release it into anything other than an alpha. I'd still put it in an alpha, but yeah, any help, I would be
your code,
very appreciative.
It's not your code. It's not your code that's doing that. I have a PR for fixing that.
Nice. But
it's
to that
earlier, too much with the focus.
To that earlier point, is there a way you could ship half the feature that you could ship the ability for this kind of mode to be added?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I've done. So, you know, this is the default, right? If you go to settings and you turn on virtual scrolling to full, then it comes on, but you could still just hit this thing and get rid of it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, and is that a different Lumino layout under the hood for that? Or like how can someone else plug into that?
Yeah, so right now I've only really made it an extension point of windowed list, which is a generic list component that the notebook happens to be a subclass of. And that thing takes a renderer, and notebook is passing in a renderer saying for each of my cells, take my cell index and add 1 to it and put that on the screen. And that's it. It's not barely giving anything else, right? But it's also saying, you know, keep me, tell me what cells are selected so I can highlight them. So the next step, which is totally backward compatible and additive, is we can make that an extension point, a public part of the notebook API itself. But we don't have to do that right now as purely like an implementation, you know, step by step. What's the smallest possible piece? Because we can release 4.1 and have 4.1.2 or whatever with this. Even though it would be an addition and strictly could have been 4.2, that's we only care about semvering. We don't mind semvering the individual JavaScript package, so we could just add that, I think, the notebook in the future really quickly.
So the windowed rendering does not split a cell, right?
No, I mean, more than what's directly visible is actually rendered. There's some stuff off screen too, so that at some speed, you're never going to notice that it's virtual. And then after it's been rendered, it stays rendered.
So if you mouse over that new scroll bar, you could, I guess, can you scroll that?
You can scroll the new scroll bar.
Okay.
Yeah, independently of scrolling the notebook document.
Cool.
In fact, that's the only scroll bar you see now. You don't see the scroll bar of the notebook document.
What else is in that hamburger menu?
No, it's just that I didn't have a good menu for what a scroll bar, good icon, so I picked hamburger. Hamburger's a button. It's just a bad button. I just didn't know what shape. You know, that vaguely looks like the item you're toggling, but it's clearly the wrong signal.
Right. But there is potential in this feature. A lot of potential. Like I'm seeing, I can imagine, like accessibility wise, notifying people that there is content off of the screen or there's overflow and stuff. I can see that one being really big with this. Because like when you think about the icon, you're like, oh, is it an up and down scroll or is it up, down, left, right? Because there are situations where up, down, left, right would actually make sense, right?
Yes. Right.
By the way, where are we getting our icons from right now?
Material UI. And I bet in Material there's something more apt than this. It could look like a bulleted list, but that kind of makes me think outline, so I didn't want to use that. I'm genuinely not satisfied with this as the actual icon for it, but I don't have the imagination to make a better one.
I feel like one of the designers you started working on this with might have a better idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually look to see. I think we had like a toggle that said virtual scrolling, but I didn't like having both this text and the written text, but that is like more understandable for sure. Like
yeah, but I don't know if you want to present the concept of virtual scrolling to new users.
That,
like,
yeah,
I think
mean, right.
Advanced scrolling maybe would be. I could see advanced scrolling being fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But that's a lot of text to write in that top right-hand corner of the side of the toolbar.
Well, it's more like when you, so if I'm going over it with a screen reader and it says virtual scrolling, I have no idea what that is. If I'm coming,
sure. Yeah, we have command names that use that phrase, virtual scrolling. We can change that to advanced scrolling. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the one that would be confusing if I was a blind user.
Okay, I'll update that.
Is there a tooltip for the? Do you have a tooltip on it?
Yeah, that's what we're. Can you see the tooltip? Is that captured in the?
It gets cut off a little bit to the right. It says toggle view.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It actually goes off the window. Let me move my window to the edge of my screen, see if it's smart enough to figure. There you go. Can you see that?
Nice. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. Virtual scroll bar is maybe too like jargony.
But is advanced scroll bar more clear and informative? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, at least I don't know. The concept of virtual, I think, is like it's not that beneficial to know what we're talking about there.
Maybe it's not scrolling, but it's navigation. Maybe it's advanced navigation or something. I see what Andre's saying. See, the virtual part's weird, right? Because like when you say like, oh, this is a virtual thing, you're like, oh, it's a simulation of it, but this actually works. I don't know, man. Ship it and let's find out what people think of it. Like, I think you've stumbled onto something that's useful because it's raising so many more questions.
Okay. Thank you everyone for the feedback.
And then at the end, we call it minimap.
Yeah, I mean, well, go on. Is that something that if talk moved out of a sidebar where no one can find it, and where people can't find it in Notebook and stuff like that, into the document, so that it was, and don't call it talk, call it outline, right? So then you're kind of using that feature. I think Word usually puts that on the left or something like that. But giving someone some semantic value other than just the number. So have the yes, there's a number, and you could type it, and there's an easy way to show someone how you would get to that number, like slash type in a number or something. But it also tells you it's a code cell, it's a raw cell, it's a markdown cell, and not trying to do a full mini map of it there, but here's the first part of it, right? Like that's
So in this PR, there is a function that's added inside the notebook widget called create scroll bar item, and it receives the cell model, but it only knows that it's a generic cell model, and it receives the index of that cell within the notebook, and it receives a handle to the actual notebook instance that we're talking about. And it's expected to return a DOM node. So it could, for example, create, title attributes that have some subset of the input, or I don't know, like whatever, like there's really a lot of possibilities. I don't want to make any of those decisions right now. I would prefer those decisions are made in future PRs. But yeah, like this is the point of this. So I totally 100% agree.
What's the status of windowed rendering in general? Are we eventually planning to make that a default? Because right now you have to manually enable it, right?
You do have to enable it yourself now, yes.
What I would love to do is to re-enable that by default for a beta or RC release of 4.1, and then we can reassess whether we are ready to make that a default. It will likely be a no, but maybe a yes.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's the point of it.
How does it make numerical statistical sense to ship that? Right? Like a lot of users, if you start with a notebook by default and you get up to 10 or 20 cells, you don't need virtual rendering, right? You don't need it. Virtual rendering is a long tail activity, right? And in a lot of ways, you're likely going to sacrifice accessibility. Like, you're going to sacrifice some accessibility to do this. And it might be easier to have a more accessible experience and like write your curriculum with 10 or 20 cells per notebook. So yeah, curious about like the statistical thresholding of it, because it just, from a sample size, like the majority of your notebooks are going to be a Poisson distribution with like a smaller number of cells, more frequent.
The answer is we don't know. We have no telemetry, and so we don't know. And we can speak hours and hours, but we don't know.
I mean, I think an argument for including it is that it's behind toggles.
Yeah, but like we have so many feature flags. I don't change. It's so hard to change the settings and the features. Like when there's too many, you don't care, right? And having to turn off a non-native feature doesn't make as much sense as volunteering to turn it on or being asked if I want to turn it on. I understand we've talked about this a lot. It's just, when this affects that first experience of a small notebook, it's weird.
Penny, to give you the answer, what commercial companies are doing is telemetry and A/B testing. We have neither of those, so we cannot answer those questions. The only answer is flags and let the user decide, or let the organization set up the Jupyter configuration the best they see fit for their user, because it's also changed depending if the guys are mainly working with small data set, big data set in education and stuff like that.
So I think like right now, the way it works is you have to manually enable windowing and then manually enable the advanced scrolling, right?
So here is how it's written. I can actually just show it again. Okay, so
I just wanted to clarify while you set up the demo. I do not fully understand why there is this assumption that you need to have a special scroll bar for Windows Notebook. Because with the other pull request that Fred is also working on, I believe that it's not the case, that we will have Windows Notebook in a shape that there will be, for the majority of use cases, no functional regressions.
It's a bug. Did you guys see that? Man, I am embarrassing myself with this demo. And I'm gonna put it on YouTube because that's just the kind of person I am. Anyway, the point is, you don't see this button at all unless windowing mode is full. And then, you know, so I think people are never going to find it, basically, unless we turn it on and see if in alpha and beta, if it turns out to have any major issues with it. And if it does, don't release it as a final without hiding it behind this setting. But if it doesn't, release it, because yeah, I mean, I'm not the only person looking at the scrolling experience here. Fred built the original scrolling experience, and he's been working on it a lot lately too. And like, you know, at some point we shouldn't have multiple ways to render a notebook. We should have one way that is rock solid, right, and just works. Like, so really, in a future where we imagine, you know, arbitrarily long documents because you wrote your book inside Jupyter or something, like we need to render only part of the document or else the browser's going to blow up. So like we just need to make it really solid, and showing people this feature in a beta seems low risk. Now, if we find, you know, and putting effort into getting people to use the beta and seeing what happens. I mean, look, obviously I'm motivated, right? Like I want this thing I wrote to be seen. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but like every new feature has some level of risk attached to it for sure.
I agree with Mike. The feature you are bringing with that PR is, I think, the beginning of something more important. And even if we keep for the time being multiple ways of rendering the notebook, it could be activated for other mode, because basically there is no reason for not allowing it for other modes. So, and if it becomes more useful, like if it brings, if user thinks it's useful, we could also just activate it by default.
Yeah, I could actually, I'm curious about it being applied to just a normal notebook with normal rendering, right? And look, I know you guys worked really hard on virtual scrolling. It's just that from an accessibility perspective, breaking scrolling can be really hard from a testing and conformance standpoint. So I'm a little bit hesitant of it. But that being said, what Darian's presenting, even without virtual scrolling, would be a really useful potential feature for just a notebook, right? And having that like navigation, high level summary sort of, it's almost like a world map in a video game, right? Like, you know, you can fast forward to like different parts of the map and then kind of zone in on the cells there.
Apologies. I just think because we only have 6 minutes left and other stuff to talk about, as interested as I am, I'm sorry we took this much time, frankly. So please, let's move the conversation on and then carry this on in the PR as well. Apologies for cutting it short. But because Tony, I know you want to announce again about the community call, and I know we have a 4.1 at least quick conversation we need to have. So yeah, please go. You're on mute.
Cool. I'll be brief then. Thanks for derailing or changing things and the demo. That was great. December 13th? Is that the day I said? Yeah, December 13th is a Wednesday. We're going to take this hour to do demos. So get your demos ready. If there's anything you've been wanting to show, yeah, be prepared to share. There's an issue that you can dive into. If anybody wants to co-host, mention in that thread. I'm going to create an agenda this week based on the resources that Isabella's put together. I'll get the sign-up sheet ready by next week, and then I'm going to need some support from other parts of the Jupyter community in making some social announcements and putting this on Twitter or Mastodon or Medium or whatever.
What kind of support do you need in terms of just taking care of it completely, like owning it for social media?
My goal is to run a very good event and focus on the quality of the event. So if y'all could, help send out some tweets like a week before, 2 days before, a day before kind of deal, that would be super helpful. If not, I'll just expect this group of people, and that's fine too. But if we want to get some there's an opportunity to bring new folks in. So if you all can help me capitalize on it, that would be great.
Okay. But do you have like a messaging in mind, or should like
not yet? Not yet. I still got to do it. It's part of the checklist, right? So I'll work on that stuff this week, and I'll have that stuff ready. If you want to watch that thread, I can update it as it gets ready.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, we're trying to figure out how to do this thing. It's a challenge, because it requires input from a bunch of different stakeholders in the community. So let's figure out how this would actually work on the Team Compass thing. It's kind of an example. So we're not sure yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's stop the recording there and talk about 4.1, and whoever needs to drop, apologies for making this go over. So I am going to stop the recording. Brace yourselves.